want to call to order the public work session with the Portsmouth Public School Board and the City Council of the City of Portsmouth. Want to thank everybody for being present. Want to certainly thank Dr. Bracey and his team for all of the hard work you all have been doing in keeping our schools safe and keeping them together. I can't say enough about what you and your staff have been doing, and we appreciate that, and I'm sure it will continue to go forward. I want to thank the chairman, Dr. Patillo, and his school board for what they've been doing in holding the line and making sure that our children and the staff get what they need to do their jobs, and we're grateful for that as well. Couple of other things for housekeeping I want to just mention before we turn the meeting over to you, Dr. Patillo and Dr. Bracey. Want to welcome back the Honorable Costella B. Williams. Good to see you. Thank you. Costella, good to see you back. Also want to welcome the newest school board member. I believe we hadn't welcomed you formally since the election, Dr. Melvin Cotton, Jr. Yes. Good to see you, sir. Thank you for your service to the community. And I want to take a moment on behalf of the City Council to send our thoughts and prayers and our best wishes to the Honorable Claude Parent. Claude gave a lot of service to the schools, not only as I guess he was a teacher and administrator, and he did a lot of things in the schools and serving on the school board. So we wish him Godspeed and all the health and love that we can send his way at this time. With that in mind, I don't think I've left anything out other than it's now time to turn the meeting over to Dr. Patillo and Dr. Bracey. Or nope, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please? I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
All the babies said.
Okay. Let me go here. Okay. Mr. Barnes.
Ingrid.
Mr. Battle.
Here.
Mrs. Lucas-Burke.
Here.
Mr. Moody.
Here.
Dr. Whitaker.
Here.
Mr. Woodard. Mayor Glover.
Here. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Now, and I also want to thank our city manager for being present with us tonight. Now, it is time to turn over the meeting to Dr. Patillo and Dr. Bracey. Gentlemen, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Glover, honorable members of City Council. We want to thank you all again for inviting us to share with you on this afternoon. I want to start by saying that the school board, we're pleased with the budget that Dr. Bracey and his team has put together, and we're hoping that you all would be pleased and be in partnership with us with that as well. We thank you all for your partnership over the years and your recent extension of that to us and how we've been able to supply what our teachers and staff need during this pandemic because of your partnership as well. So thank you all for that. And I'll turn this over to Dr. Bracey and to Mr. Falk.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Chair, and good evening to everyone. So before we actually get started, I need to let our clerk open the meeting for us.
Ms. Atkinson?
Here.
Dr. Cotton?
Present.
Mr. Tillage?
Here.
Dr. Whitaker? Here. Mrs. Williams?
Here.
Dr. Patillo?
Okay, here. Thank you. Okay. Now I'll turn it over to Dr. Bracey and Mr. Falk.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you, sir. All right. So what I want to do now is to get into our estimate of needs for this upcoming year, 22-23. So I want to thank the mayor, vice mayor, Dr. Patillo, Vice Chair Atkinson, and members of the City Council and School Board. It's an honor to be here before you this afternoon to share our meeting. Mr. Falk, our CFO, and his team have worked diligently to put a proposal together for you to review. So at this time, I will turn it over to him.
Good afternoon, Mayor Glover,
Afternoon, sir.
Vice Mayor Barnes, Chairman Patillo, Vice Chair Atkinson, and members of City Council and School Board. I'm happy to be here today to share this proposal with you. What we wanted to do, next slide, please. That's right. We wanted to give you just a little acquaintance to our budget, the funds that we have available under our perusal. and just kind of go through some of the just high-level pieces on this slide. As you can see in the middle, the general fund at 76% is our largest fund. That's our fund that manages the revenues and expenditures of our day-to-day school operations. Again, as you can see, it's 76%. Our second largest fund is our grants fund. That consists of federal, state, local grant funding used for specific purposes. For example, it covers our Title I fund, special ed, vocational education, and any other grants that support our students in numerous ways. That is about 10% of this budget. Our next fund is our risk management fund, which does what it says. It accounts for all expenditures related to health insurance, insurance premiums, workers' compensation, any of our property casualty, and that fund is 9% of this budget. Next is our cafeteria fund, which covers all of the food services that goes on in the school division. It's a separate account and an enterprise fund that accepts fees for that particular service, which is food services, at 4%. And then lastly, our textbook fund, which is mainly for the purchase and distribution of textbooks at 1% of our budget. And that's the smallest fund in our budget line. Next slide, please. So in this budget, the total of all of our funds that we have available is $239.5 million. You can see the 5 funds and how they're broken out there. We wanted to give you a snapshot of these funds. We will focus mostly on our general fund in this presentation, but wanted to give you a snapshot of all the rest of the funds that we have available in its entirety for those that we manage. And keep in mind, in the grants fund, that's the recurring part of grants funds. We obviously have ARP funds and other pandemic-related funds that are in addition to that fund, but we wanted to make sure we were looking apples to apples from year to year with the grants funds. And so you'll see that that's $23.5 million of those grants that we normally get from a year-to-year basis. Next slide, please. So our proposed operating budget for this year, as you will see, in FY 21-22 is about $168.1 million. This year it is roughly, and this is the general fund, $181.9 million for a difference of about $13.8 million. This proposal includes initiatives that were identified by our school board, our community, and our staff as priorities. Obviously, priorities in this case for us this year are an overall staff increase, salary increase, and funding to support several hard to staff positions. As always, this budget focuses on enhancing student achievement and a continued focus on student supports to support our student body and our school community at large. We're also ensuring that our technology resources are current and up to date and that we're aligned to current standards. In addition, we've added funds to enhance instructional programs and also to deliver instruction. Later in the presentation, Dr. Bracey will walk through these specific initiatives to give you more information on those. And these initiatives will allow us to address those priorities that were made available by our stakeholders. This budget is a conservative budget of need. We tried to put it together with that in mind. There are some areas where we need to upgrade and make investments to continue to develop and give quality instruction. And then there are other places where we need to do some things that are new to give our students quality educational experiences. And so that's what we're trying to do with this budget. Next slide, please. The next slide, this slide will give you a snapshot of our budgeted revenue sources. Obviously, in a fiscally dependent state or school division, our revenue sources are the most important and where we start to build our budget. As you can see, the largest part of our funding, at about $100.3 million, comes from state school operating funds. Those funds are based on our average daily membership, which we have to make sure we track and monitor as we go on, because any increase or decrease in that average daily membership can affect the amount of revenue that we receive. So as you can see, state funds make up the largest part of this budget at 55%. So just to give you a snapshot, why is our revenue going up by about $14 million for this year? Well, in our state funds, we have a number of increases. One, there's about $6.7 million in at-risk funding that is going to increase for students who are determined as being educationally at risk. That's based on the number of free and reduced lunch participants that we have in the school division. Secondly, in this budget, the state put added a 5% increase for SOQ funded positions. As we've told you in the past, SOQ funded positions don't include all of the positions within the school division, only a certain number of them. So any other funding, any other raise that we would give to any other employee, we would have to find that in other funding. That amount is about 3.4%. Third, there was an increase in the basic aid standards of quality line due to re-benchmarking. In the first year of a biennium, which this is would be the first year, the state re-benchmarks cost and fees to make sure that they're on line with the market. And so in this case, that was an increase of about $2.5 million. The state also gives us estimates for sales tax each year based on the volume of sales tax that would come back to us based on the volume of sales in the locality. They're proposing an increase of about $2.2 million. However, I caution that because depending on what happens in the economy affects that number. So if the economic factors change, then we would have to keep making sure that we monitor what's coming through in sales tax revenue as we go forward. So we use the state's estimate in our budgets, but we monitor through the year to make sure that nothing has changed, whether it be inflation, whether it be a downward turn in spending, or so on and so forth. And then lastly, on the state level, since this is a benchmarking year, the state used FY 2020 and FY 2021 costs to re-benchmark. But what happened in those years were they were a pandemic year. So the funding, so the cost that people were spending and the expenditures were down. So the state put in a whole harmless of about $2.8 million to cover those decreases in expenditures during the pandemic years, we call them. You will notice in the city funds and the local funds, that's about 33% of our budget. We have not asked for an increase this year. We're still asking for $59.9 million, which is the same amount that we had asked for in the FY 21-22 budget. So we wanted to note that we had enough state funds in this budget that we look like we could cover some of the initiatives that we put in as we go forward. And then our estimates for federal and other funds stayed the same, pretty much flat as they have before. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Brace, and he's going to share where we're going to invest our funds in this budget.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. And in many ways, my estimate of needs this year is relatively simple. You know, while there's ongoing maintenance and instructional needs of the school division that have to be addressed, I had one budget priority into coming into our planning sessions with our staff, and that was that we were going to focus on our staff. We all know that this has been a trying year in education, and it's coming on the heels of more trying years before that. The pandemic has only served to highlight the ongoing stresses and needs in today's classrooms, and that lean more demands on that our teachers and staff deal with each and every day. Compensation in comparison to the growing salaries of the private sector is making education a more difficult path for students to choose. Next slide. In fact, I'd like to read a portion of a column posted this month by the LA Times by writer L.Z. Granderson. He writes, between 2006 and 2019, the number of education degrees dropped 22%, while our population continued to grow. Now, COVID safety concerns are causing even more people to second guess the profession, with the Bureau of Labor Statistics saying that there are 567,000 fewer educators in public schools today than before the pandemic. A recent poll commissioned by the NEA found 55% of educators looking to leave the profession earlier than planned. Those are some daunting statistics, and ones that we don't want to see further localized here in Portsmouth. Next slide. That's why I'm recommending a full 5% raise for all PPS employees for the 22-23 school year. As you may have read, the governor's proposed biennium budget, it includes a 5% raise, but that was for only SOQ positions. We know that every staff member in PPS has worked tirelessly and deserves to have their efforts recognized as well. And one of the things that our board always does, that even though SOQ funding is coming down, we can't just give those employees a 5% and not have everyone get the same raise. Next slide. So the total cost for this is going to be a total of $6.8 million for our, no, you're fine, for our staff. In addition, we also must remain competitive in the hiring market as it comes to retention of staff and of our staff members. And that includes our bus drivers, bus monitors, and school nurses. We've struggled throughout the past year, and we've worked through these vacancies. That's why I'm proposing pay increases for these roles. Next slide. To begin, we'll start with our bus drivers. Currently, we have a starting pay of $13.83 an hour. My proposal is to increase the starting pay to $16.60 per hour, which will be a total cost to the budget of $521,000. Next is our school bus monitors. For our bus monitors, we have a starting pay at $11 per hour. My proposal is to increase the starting pay to $13.20 an hour, which will be a total cost to our budget of $144,000. Similarly, next slide. Similarly, we have worked throughout the years to improve school nurse pay. Today, the starting salary for RN working as a school nurse is $33,308. My proposal tonight is to increase that starting salary to $39,969,000. This change will be applied to all of our RNs on staff, and that will be a total cost of $147,000. With us, we have some LPNs that work within the division. Historically, we all try to find RNs, but when we find ourselves in a shortage, we were allowed to use some of the LPNs. So we want to make sure that our RN pay is comparable to our neighbors. Next slide. While we're talking about staffing, another key area that we had to address this year is in regard to our athletic trainers. We've contracted service out in years past. However, the vendor has struggled to find candidates interested in these positions, and other divisions and organizations hired them directly, complete with the benefit packages. I'm recommending the hiring of 4 athletic trainers to support our student athletes and sports programs, and therefore decrease our dependence on contracted services. And that would be a total cost of $375,000 to our budget. Not to say that we won't contract some of these services out, but we won't depend on them solely to provide these services. Next slide. On my final staff note, I'm recommending that we create a permanent substitute pool of 25 permanent subs who will work for the school division. With this pool, administration will be able to strategically place a permanent substitute in schools based on the school and the division's needs at that time. As you all know, and we just talked about the shortage of people going into the profession, and we need long-term subs anyway, every day. So with what we're having in place is, being that we know we won't be able to fill all of our vacancies, but if we can screen and hire 25 permanent subs, then that would help us, and our HR department could deploy them where the needs are. Next slide. This budget also includes other recommended budget initiatives that we consider crucial to our operation of our school division. Many of these initiatives are continuous programs that we participate in, and some are new based on changes in our current operations. Additional support of technology to ensure that our students and our staff have access to the current resources that will enhance and make the learning environment more engaging. This includes continued maintenance and purchase of Chromebooks and the purchase of additional laptop carts for classroom use. Also, the replacement of the classroom projection systems that we have in our facilities as well. Continuing the support and expansion of dual enrollment, first college, early college programs with our partnership with TCC. Increasing the amounts of our allocation to keep up with the rising costs of providing services to our special education students with our partnership with CCEP. Funding to support professional development so that staff members will continue to be well-trained and familiar with the latest educational strategies to foster student success. As social, emotional learning and mental health are our top priority, next slide, for our school board and community as a whole, we have included funds that will allow us to procure contractors that can provide services to support our student body. we determined that contracted services may be the best route, since we would need to identify those needs that are most critical and tailor those services and solutions to the needs. Additional support for our facilities maintenance as related to equipment and contracted services. This will ensure our facilities operate effectively and efficiently, and that our maintenance programs are in line with our current industry standards. As we see in our everyday lives, the cost of fuel and energy is on the rise. Therefore, we have included additional funds to help keep up with the inflationary factors that affect these costs. An increase in the general fund transfers to other funds to cover the increases in risk management and claims and expenditures. Next slide. Those were the highlights from the operational budget, and I want to now give a brief update on our needs from our capital improvement program. Next slide. This recommendation is not new to the body tonight. You know, as we've requested in years past, based on our facility study that we had completed and shared with you back in 2018, we're still advocating for the construction of 2 new facilities here in our division. The first will be a new K-8 middle school. This will allow us to address some of the overcrowding issues we're seeing in some areas of the city, and will also allow us to move to a true middle school model in Portsmouth Public Schools, where students citywide in grades 6 through 8 will then move to middle school, not currently like they are now with just 7th and 8th. Also, in line with our facility study, we're requesting a new Churchland Middle School to be constructed. Churchland is our middle school with the largest student enrollment, and there are various infrastructure needs in the school that can be most efficiently addressed by way of new construction as opposed to the prolonged renovations. And these are some things that we've shared with you in years past about these new facilities that we're requesting. Next slide. As you know, due to the ongoing needs of the pandemic, part of the Federal American Rescue Plan funds, or ARP funds, were specifically allocated to schools to address any air filtration needs in our buildings. Since we have received these funds, we have begun planning not only replacing HVAC units completely, but also modernizing the units as needed. In some cases, these were in need, and these were some that we identified previously through our CIP presentation. So we're glad to be able to address some of these things with those funds that we've received from the federal. So that concludes my presentation. As always, I thank you for your consideration to this budget proposal. It is my deep belief that what we've outlined to you is in the best interest of our entire school division. I'm encouraged by the incredible work that our staff does each and every day, and if we can support them with this proposed budget, I know that it will make us all continue to shine brighter together in years to come. So that completes my presentation, and we're prepared for questions at this time.
Dr. Whitaker, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. To our chair, Dr. Patillo, Vice Chair Atkinson, and all of the school board members, and Dr. Bracy. I'm encouraged to see the budget that was presented. I'm always concerned, though, when I see level funding coming from the City Council. I don't know if that's something as a precedent we want to continue, but I would like to find out, because Mr. Falk, you stated that this is a conservative budget. Is that my understanding?
Conservative budget of need. A budget of need, though. It's conservative budget, a budget of need.
Right.
It fills all of our needs that we would need at this time. Yes, sir.
Okay, and so just some areas I want to make sure that are covered. So for first college students and dual enrollment, are there any fees that our students have to pay to be a part of those programs?
I think the majority of the fees are covered with them. I don't believe we have any. We cover them through the school division as well as some of the grants through the Beasley Foundation. So that covers their tuition.
So a student in first college doing enrollment, they don't have to pay anything to be a part of those programs?
No, sir.
Okay, good. And athletics, equipment, uniforms, said all of that is covered in this budget? All
Yes.
the necessary equipment that our students need and uniforms, they don't have to fundraise to buy particular uniforms for any area of extracurricular?
And that's something that we have addressed and reiterated that as well, that if it's something that the students need, that needs to be identified up front,
Okay.
and we will cover those costs.
Okay.
I think in the past, historically, advisors, sponsors find themselves at where they say we need to fundraise for this. But I think if we know what we need going into it and effectively plan, that's something that can be covered within the budget that we send to the schools.
Okay, so we shouldn't be seeing our
We
students
shouldn't
fundraising.
we shouldn't be seeing that
Okay.
at all. No.
Just want to make sure, because
Right. I know it. I know.
like level funding, I want to make sure we've covered.
Right, and let me address the piece with the level funding. So, when Mr. Falk and I were talking, and then talking to the board and the finance committee, this is with the influx of dollars that came from the state. It took care of what we needed to do the 5% for those non-SOQ funded positions, but we also realized, and we wanted to make sure that we shared that at this meeting, that this is a proposed budget, and it's based on the budget that Governor Northam put in place. So as of now, Governor Youngkin hasn't pulled back on any of that, but we know we reserve the right to say, hey, things have changed, so we may have to come back. I'm not anticipating that, but we wanted to put that out there and let you know that this budget was based on what was presented to us. But now, if something happens and they don't come through with what they've proposed, then that puts us in a different situation where we may have to come back and share that information with you and what that cost would be if it came to that. But right now, we feel good with the additional funds that we received from the state. And of course, this past year wasn't a normal year. We had a lot of initiatives out there that we put in place for this current school year that we're trying to make sure that we see them through and make sure that those are operating efficiently. But one of the things that we knew we wanted to do was to at least get our bus drivers, our school nurses, the bus monitors, and those folks in place, the RNs as well, because that's something that the board with the nurses have been working on over a 3-year implementation. So we just needed to go ahead and get them where they needed to be, because we were lagging in the region, being dead last, and that hurt us.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Lucas.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chair Cardell Patillo, Atkinson, and Dr. Bracy and Mr. Falk. Appreciate the school board members being here. Conservative budget, but school nurses. I have a niece who is an RN, and she has worked at Chesapeake Regional and currently in our program, and I know that they can go anywhere and get pay that is probably twice and sometimes even triple this amount. So the cost that you're proposing to pay for the nurses that are on hand, does that cover enough nurses? Do we have enough nurses in the school system to sustain all of the schools that are currently in place?
Well, the figure that you see, that's the beginning salary. So we have some nurses that are above that,
Right.
so they will still be affected by the level of increase that the others are seeing. So it'll be a significant bump in terms of where they are now. And that's something with the nurses that we know we're going to have to come back and address even next year.
Right.
Because based on where they are and where we want them to be, we phased it in, but we did, this being the end of a 3rd year, we bumped it up even more than the percentage that we were initially looking for. Now with us, we have nurse shortages. One of the things that we do is we contract those services out as well with the company that helps us staff those positions, because this day and time with the pandemic and everything that we're dealing with, we have to have a nurse in our facility. So it costs more for us to contract it out, but the need is you have to have them, and we do have LPNs as well that help us fill some of those positions as well.
Exactly. And then my final question is on the capital improvement, the new construction needs. Has the study been done? I mean, do you know how much these 2 proposed schools are going to cost, or are you still working through that, or? Just where are you with that?
We haven't gotten any new numbers on that yet. You know, the numbers that we got were, maybe 4 years ago
Right.
when we did the study. So as you and I both know,
It's increased.
it's up now because the materials for building, all of that has increased. So I don't have an exact figure on that. I know that part of what we discussed with the liaisons when they came together was, you know, I know that they were, with us being able to take on some of the CIP initiatives through our grant funds, that would help free up money to get the planning going, to start the dialogue and the movement toward new instruction. That's, you know, that's some of the information that we talked about in those meetings.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Barnes, you have the floor, sir.
As far as the school bus drivers, the school bus monitors, the school nurses, I know in order to get them, we have to be competitive. What do we rank opposed to the other cities?
Let's see. With the nurses, we
Maybe about third to fourth.
now or
area.
before?
Before we were last.
Yeah, you talking about before and what the proposed would be?
For the proposal.
Before the proposal?
Before the proposal and
Okay, each. Okay, so we were last with the nurses. So with this, the new proposed budget will be in the middle within the region. So we're looking at about six or seven of us in the region. So we're probably somewhere in the top 3. That's where that would bring us. With the bus drivers, with this new proposed budget, I think we'll probably be maybe in
First or second.
First or second. And I think at least second. Not that's with all things being equal.
Right.
And everybody gives a 5%. Then we should definitely be somewhere between in the 1 or 2.
So let me ask this: the ones that are first, what are they? Do you see them? Do they have a shortage of bus drivers?
They still have a shortage as well. They do. Yeah. And then when I say we may be second, we may all have the same dollar amount. It may be 16. We may be 1620. They may be 1660 or 1690. So we made a conscious effort to move the drivers, the bus drivers and bus monitors, so that we can be more competitive with our neighbors.
Do you feel if we added a little bit more and made it a significant difference from everybody else, that we could possibly take some of those bus drivers and fill ours up?
I mean, I think money does talk, and I think that's one of the reasons why we moved in this direction. So, look, nobody's going to complain with more. You know, I can share that with you. I don't anticipate that. I think I can speak for them as it pertains to that.
One more thing, Mayor. And as far as the new construction with the middle schools, I know when we had Liaison, we did talk about if you guys could cover some of the costs. We would be happy to kind of get to some of those CIP issues. And I think with the middle schools, that's a really big thing, because in our city, we start at middle school at 7th grade, so we're already behind when it comes to that, in a lot of different avenues. And also when it comes to the pandemic, as far as keeping our kids spread out, I think it's important that we do add those middle schools so that we can keep them out, keep them from getting sick, and keep our teachers from getting sick. As somebody with kids in the school system, my child had to be out of school a couple of times because of the teachers and things, and that's because we're being exposed a lot with crowded classrooms and things of that nature. So I would like to see this council really push to making sure that those schools happen so that we can get that spread out and make it safe for our children and our teachers and our staff.
Thank you, sir. Couple of things. Is there any other questions anyone else has?
I do.
Councilman Moody, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. Good to see everyone. Security. I don't see anything specifically about any need for increased security. Our school resource officers, you're reading a lot about systems that are beefing up security, adding resource officers. Is that, you feel that's adequate? at the current status?
Well, I think what we've looked at with the school resource officers, we were able to expand this year and have all of our secondary schools covered, and then have additional officers that are able to service our elementary schools. Now, we've had some discussion amongst ourselves to look at the possibility of having a school resource officer in every school. You know, we've had that discussion. The model that we have now has been working, but of course, I think everybody would feel good if you had one at every location. I think the challenge with that, it wouldn't be. I guess it would be. It would, and it wouldn't be our problem. Is that finding the people to go there? I know the police department is at a shortage, to the point that we're using now sheriff's deputies to cover our school resource officer positions. So that is something that we've discussed. It wasn't something that we put in the budget because we know the possibility of it not being filled. But currently, under the current structure, the Sheriff Moore has done an excellent job with getting us coverage if we need it at some of the additional elementary schools. If it's something that occurred in the neighborhood that we need support, he'll have someone there. That doesn't take away from the secondary schools where our folks are needed. So right now we're good with that. The Sheriff's Department is looking at grants to expand the staffing even down to some of the elementary schools. So in looking at that, I think we're just sort of waiting to see how that goes. But this year has been, so far, you know, we've had some concerns, but we've had the personnel on site to do it. In addition to that, the police department still provides an SRO to our high schools. So we have 2 school resource officers at our high schools, and that's something that we haven't had in the past. So we feel good about where we are and where we're going with the SRO piece.
Thanks.
Councilman Woodard, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chair Patillo and Vice Chair Dr. Bracy. I got a question. Is all our bus drivers at least up to this 16 hour? Is anybody making below that right now that's currently driving?
That's making below the 16?
Yes, 16.
Yes.
It is people that's making below this now. So are we doing anything to bump them up to this? Because I know, like you say, for the 22, 23 year, we're going to start them out with 1660. Is you guys putting any plan together for everyone to be on the same playing field?
Right. So everybody will be affected by this percent increase.
Right.
So we won't have a situation, you're a first-year driver coming in making 16. I've been driving for 15 or 20 years, and I'm at 16. You will have the separation there based on the percentage that we're implementing. So if you're currently at $16 an hour, then whatever the percentage is that you see will be applied to where they currently are. So, because if we didn't do it that way,
You lose that?
Yeah.
we'd be in trouble.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It
And I
wouldn't
know
be
that's-
any need to
Right,
do
if
this.
it flows through the schedule, so the starting, and then it goes all the way down at every step for each step level. The raise, increase goes into effect. So nobody will, like you said, nobody will come in making, more than somebody that's been here for 10, 15 years.
Right, because I think that could start a problem or two,
Oh, yeah.
I would say that.
And that's for all positions, nurses.
Right.
monitors,
All over.
across the board.
Okay. And also, the crisis counselors, I didn't see anything in here, but is it anything that you guys are implementing, because it's a lot of issues per se not going within the school but throughout our city, that we want to make sure that our children are making sure they're getting all the mental health needs or situations that's going on within our community. So can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yes, that was the part that you saw in there that we talked about, that some of these services would be contracted services. We've talked in the past about bringing on counselors, that deal more with trauma. But the problem we would have in other school divisions that are that have those positions out there, they can't find them. And they make more money in the private sector. So that's why we said once we determine what the level of need is, then we'll come back and we'll reach out to one of the contracted services and have them provide those services to us so that when we need them, we will have them, rather than us being in a situation needing them and advertising and can't find anyone to fill the position.
400% and 100. All right, okay. Well, thank you. Fantastic job you guys are doing. All right.
Great presentation, Dr. Bracy, Mr. Falk, certainly Chairman Patillo, and Vice Chair Atkinson. A couple of questions I had in looking at the proposal, and then a comment. Athletic trainers, I saw where you indicated you want to bring them in-house versus using contracted folks. Was the cost of using contracted folks a little bit more than the $375 proposed, or was it not?
In years past, the contracted services that we have, the contract, it varies.
Right.
Let me tell you how we ended up in the situation that we were in. So before this company was awarded the contract, it was sort of like a limbo. So the current employees didn't know if they were going to be retained. So they opted out and went and found employment that was a little bit more stable.
Yeah.
So with that, they probably, in looking at the salary, we reached out to some of them that left us to find out, where they were salary-wise, and we know why they left because they shared that information with us. So with us being able to offer a competitive salary, we should be able to bring them back in, and that will help us even more.
I like the idea. I think it's a great idea, and I think that's absolutely in order. The other thing I wanted to ask was, help me, because I really don't know the difference. Permanent substitute teachers, I know you talked about you want to hire 25 permanent substitutes. Is there a difference between a regular teacher and a permanent substitute teacher?
So when you say regular teacher,
Yeah, like a teacher that's...
So like a third grade teacher?
Right, a third grade teacher versus a long-term sub. Is there a difference?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
a third grade teacher is someone that we've employed that's in that classroom each and every day,
Okay.
teaching and doing the instruction and so forth. What's happening, we're in the midst of a teacher shortage nationwide.
Right.
So we can't find that third grade teacher.
Right.
So in years past, principals have been identifying people that they want to bring in as a permanent sub.
Right.
So, and that won't change, but what we're doing to assist with that, we're just going to, from the beginning, we're going to hire 25 permanent subs to assist with some of the vacancies that we may have at the beginning of the year.
Right.
So if let's say you're at Lakeview and you're the principal and HR knows that you have 3 vacancies. So we may be able to place you with 3 of our long-term permanent subs that we have.
Okay.
These are permanent subs
Right.
that we have that are employed by the division. So that will make you whole in a sense because you have a permanent sub.
Right.
And what we're doing, we're looking at the qualifications because we have so many teachers, so many subs that have degrees that are 2 or 3 classes or an exam away from being a certified teacher.
Right.
So, and they're great teachers.
Sure.
So we can hire them and let them work until they complete those requirements, because we lose teachers every year that haven't met some standard, whether it was a test.
Right.
But if you look at years past, their evaluations have been stellar. Their students, their SOL scores have been through the roof. So if we can retain them,
Right.
that would be beneficial to the school and for the students.
Great. The last question. I mean, how's the morale overall with the teachers and in the buildings? I know folks are still dealing with a lot of things. I know this whole mask mandate issue. How's the morale? I'm just curious. How's the morale with everybody? Are folks okay?
I think everybody's okay. But let me say this: everybody is stressed.
Sure.
We're all doing things that we didn't expect to do,
Right.
As educators. So you got to couple that with carrying on your day-to-day operations of teaching and learning and working with your students. you've got that added layer of responsibilities that initially wasn't there. Our teachers and our counselors, they're social workers, they're epidemiologists. So, they're taking all of this in, and that stresses them. So if you want to equate that to low morale, then you can. But that's something that everybody's dealing with. So if you ask a teacher or an administrator or an educator, they'll say, these are some stressful times. And a lot of people mistake the stressful times for saying that their morale is low. We all feel it.
Right.
Yeah, we all feel it. But I give our folks credit. They're doing an excellent job in managing through this whole pandemic.
Thanks, man. Thank you for sharing. I think you had, and then Dr. Whitaker.
I'm done.
Okay, Dr. Whitaker. So you have the floor.
Just want to follow up on a question the mayor asked. Issue. The teachers, the permanent subs that are not certified, and you said they're a couple of classes away, is there any financial assistance being provided for them to finish up?
Well, yeah, we have a grant in place that they can use to help with courses, whatever they may need, or study. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And on the new construction needs, I noticed there had been some discussion about the career technical education, what we used to call vocational.
Yes.
Where are we on that discussion as far as bringing that back into our system, the OIC Norca model, where you had the electrical, plumbing, HVAC, auto mechanic?
Right. We've talked about that one as well. I mean, and that could have or should have been the third one up there, because that's another one that we've all discussed.
So is that something that's going to be presented to council as part of the CIP?
Well, I think what we need to see exactly what we can do. I think what's more pressing is to get the middle school in place so that we can alleviate the if we can do the K-8 first. What that will do, it'll replace Churchland Elementary, which is one of the ones that was on the list that needed to be replaced, and it will give us a fourth middle school, and then we can have the true middle school concept 6 through 8. So what we can do next is we know we have to still address Churchland Middle School itself, but we also talked about in that new construction, like we initially went from a new middle school to a K-8, we can have the dialogue of having the new Churchland Middle School along with building a wing or two of the CTE model. You can always look at it as, we can look at it combining. It can be one facility where it can be separated, just like with the K-8 model. We've also talked about a standalone school for the career and technical school. So really, it's wherever we get to with the planning, but we're still on board with the CTE school.
I believe it's something of urgency, particularly with the level of poverty that's in our city, and that there will be students that will not qualify to attend TCC.
To go to TCC, exactly.
And so we have to have something there to catch them. And so I think that's something we need to really seriously consider as far as addressing a lot of issues within the city amongst our young people, and creating some opportunities for them outside of just academia and college. And so I think that's something we should be definitely getting. And the other point, last point, the national discussion about putting more police into schools, for council, that's a budget and a policy issue, because council, the city is funding those police positions.
Yes.
I would think before we would even consider putting more police in the school, that we are clear on policy, and that is, what will they be responding to? And so I think that as we talk about that, there has to be policy, some policy that goes along with that, because we don't want to start getting our elementary school students into the criminal process over issues that the police really shouldn't even be responding to. So I think that's going to be a significant policy issue if that's something that the city is funding and moving in that direction. So that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Moody, sir.
Couple questions. One is the ADM, how we look at as far as the increase, decrease. I know for a few years there's been a lot of leakage. Have we reversed that, or does the pandemic cause that to pick up?
Up until the pandemic, actually the year before the pandemic, we actually had an increase in students. And let's see, that would have been 1819. And right now, we're probably trending about where our ADM is for this year. Keep in mind, we have students on virtual learning that come to us with ADM and then just trying to recover from the pandemic. So we're looking at our numbers very closely to see kind of where we are for this year. But this year will give us a good snapshot, because last year we were held harmless for many of the decreases in students for last year. So we're looking at our numbers very closely, but we're right on line with our ADM right now.
Okay. Other question on the salaries for the athletic trainers and permanent substitute teachers. Do those numbers reflect benefits? Are they inclusive of benefits?
For the athletic trainers, yes, sir. The permanent subs do not get benefits.
I'm sorry. Well,
They do not get benefits. The permanent subs that we have here, they wouldn't get benefits. They would be just like a regular substitute teacher.
But the salary figure, the $375, includes benefits?
Yes, sir. Includes benefits.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions from Vice Mayor Barnes?
As far as that mask mandate, do you anticipate any staff possibly leaving because of that? If we go without I know, was it March 1st? It's supposed to go to optional mask.
Mm-hmm.
Do you anticipate any staff leaving from that?
Not that I'm aware of. I know we're going to talk about that Thursday at our board meeting, and just get advice from council in terms of expectations. What we should expect, what we can expect, and what we can and what we can't do and enforce. So I haven't heard anyone say anything to that effect. I was in a school this morning, and just asking the principal that same question, and they weren't anticipating anything alarming.
And as far as the CIP, to kind of piggyback off of what Dr. Whitaker said earlier, with all that's going on in our city now, one of the things that kind of cures some of the violence that's going on in people's circumstances, the root issues are jobs and opportunity. And I think that the Votech school will be a very good benefit to our city in helping kids get off the street and have a different opportunity. So I think that should be definitely something that that's a high priority. Also, the fields and the clubhouses for the schools, I think that's another revenue source for our city, especially when you look at different cities and their opportunities that they have for bringing different money to their economy. I think those fields that we wanted to do for our high school should definitely be another high priority for our city and for you guys.
Right, and I'm not opposed to multiple projects.
I'm not either.
Yeah, if you can build a middle school and a CTE school, or if we come together, we can lay out a timetable of what we can get done. Yeah, by all means. I don't disagree. The day I walked through the door 7 years ago, the CTE, and then depending on who you talk to, if they were older, the vocational school was always in the discussion. I've had meetings with Mr. Battle, with forums that he's held at his office, with people that have come from Richmond that have even talked about that. This is before he was even on council. So this has been an ongoing discussion. So I know the importance of it. So I think it's just a matter of us sitting around the table and just looking at it and just see what we can do and how we can do it. What needs to be first. When will the next one come afterwards if we can't do them together? I mean, we're not opposed to it. They're all needs. You're right. They're all needs. I guess when we initially look at it, we're thinking of, academically, what can we do to impact? And that's when we talk about the additional K-8 school. But when you look at it from another standpoint of looking at it through the community, then yeah, you're right. The CTE piece is very important because that's going to have an effect on those students as well that usually slip through the cracks, as you mentioned, Dr. Whitaker. I don't disagree. I mean, we've got a lot of things that we can do here. We just need to huddle up and come to an agreement on how we can make it happen.
I think at the end of the day, for you guys, you're just trying to make a priority list, but the truth is it comes down to council and what we consider a priority. And I think all of these things are a priority given the circumstances that's going on in our city right now. We got to change the conditions by changing the opportunities. So I think those should be top on our list when we consider this budget season and helping out our school system, especially since they came with a budget where they're covering most of the things themselves.
So it's fun.
Dr. Whitaker, sure you have the
So
floor.
when we're talking about huddling up,
Yes, sir.
that's why we have the city manager is the one that's going to call the huddle. And
Right.
I guess the school board is going to ask you to huddle with the city manager.
Oh, I would.
And I think looking at what we have here, that is something that we ought to be able to make happen if we're willing to do it.
Right. Well, and I wasn't talking about you all. No.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know. I'm just making sure that if that's something that you've been talking about for 7 years, and I'm looking around the room, then why isn't that it can't happen?
I mean, I'm sorry, can I speak, man?
You have the floor, sir.
I think when it comes to the kids, that's an important thing because if you talk to the kids, they kind of want the same things that everybody else has, and just the opportunity of not having middle school and the 6th grade still being in elementary school, and that stunts a lot of growth when it comes to mental and things of that nature. So I think it's time that we put our children in an equal playing field like everybody else around the 757.
So one more question that
Sure, sir.
was raised about the permanent subs not having benefits. Is that a budget issue?
Well, none of the subs that we have, even the ones, so basically what this is a long-term sub,
Right.
and they don't receive the benefits. But what we're saying is that we're going to capture 25 of these long-term subs, and they don't have to be concerned about having an assignment for 2 months and then not having anything. We want to have 25 long-term subs at our disposal that we can send wherever they need to be. So we're still using that concept and then just basically bringing them in-house. So that's the difference. They didn't have the benefits anyway.
Right.
So that's what we were doing.
I thought when you were saying long-term that or permanent, that they were there on a much longer time period than 2 months.
They will be with the division throughout the year. They may be at, as the example I use, they may be at Lakeview for a month or two until a teacher can be hired. Then it's off to the next assignment that we give them.
So they get stability in the position.
And basically, when we talked about that item on the budget, is that it's difficult to find long-term subs because they don't have the job security they need. Saying if I'm going to work for 2 months, what am I going to do to pay bills for the 2 months after that? So by doing this and getting them in one one place in the beginning of the year saying, hey, you're going to have job security for the entire school year if you come on board with Portsmouth Public Schools, and you'll get paid this amount for the entire year. And we have students who graduate from college who don't necessarily have the ability to pass the practice exams at graduation.
Right.
They become discouraged, they leave the profession and find a job somewhere else.
That's right.
So to stop that gap, we have Portsmouth students that we actually can track as they go through college to major in education. As they prepare to graduate, we have this to offer them as well to work, and we can help with the grant to pay the cost for additional classes that they need. It's difficult to get a provisional license if you have a computer science degree. You still need 3 or 4 more classes just to get a provisional license. By doing this, we can bring them in the school division full-time, help you get the classes you need to get your provisional license, put you on track to become a full-time educator. So that's how putting that program in place will benefit the school division.
My question or issue is that wouldn't it be more of an incentive if you're offering benefits, if you know that these persons are going to be there permanent throughout the year, and they can't contract with any other school district, they have to be with Portsmouth, is that the case?
Yes.
So that's why I'm asking, is it a budget issue why they're not offered benefits?
No, it wasn't. No, we just looked at it from the current model that we had and just tried to narrow it in to say, hey, based on what you currently do as a long-term sub, we're going to have 25 positions here. It wasn't why we didn't.
I thought it was a budget issue.
No.
I thought it was something we needed to.
Right.
Okay.
It wasn't.
Vice Mayor Barnes.
So, well, is that just a yearly thing for them, or when you say long-term sub, are they going to be here
We budgeted for them for the entire year.
just for that 1 year?
Yeah, just 1 year, because this is new. Yeah. So we wanted to basically try it out and pilot this to see the benefits of it. Before, I guess you could say before we say this is a permanent permanent sub position that we would have in place.
So are we encouraging them to go get the necessary certificates, classes, and things that they need?
Yes, if approved, that will be part of the job description that we put in place, and those are the people that we will be looking for that apply for this position.
So does the grant cover 25 members that want to go get the certificates and things that they need to become a teacher?
It covers. It does cover where we can use it for practice, coursework. Yes.
It will cover all 25 if all 25 wanted to do it. That's what I'm saying. Or,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it'll cover it.
Thank you. Well, what I want to say is this is a partnership, and we are going to work together. We hear you loud and clear, and we appreciate the work you guys do. And as you know, in the partnership, there are a lot of players at the table. I talked to Dr. Constant, and I know you talked to Dr. Constant at TCC. We can pretty much do a lot of different things, but to your point, once we get to the table and determine how we move forward, I think we'll figure out the way forward. And I just want to thank each of you guys for your input, for your care and concern, and the work that you do every day. And we appreciate it. And I think that as we go forward, as we look at what the needs are, we're going to continue to work together and improve it as we go along. So thank you for your time, for your work, and everything you do. Most importantly, stay safe and healthy. And if there are no other questions or comments, this meeting is adjourned. We're now ready to continue our public work session. Once again, I want to thank the citizens for joining in. And council members, we do have a Historic Preservation Commission appeal for consideration of 315 Broad Street. Is the applicant present?
Yes, sir.
Sir, would you please come forward?
Yes, sir.
State your name and address, and sir, you have 10 minutes.
All right, my name is Adam Varner. The address is 315 Broad Street. I purchased the property, say back in October. in between the time of purchasing the property and starting to do some work on the property, when I came back in there, there was a significant hole in the roof that was causing damage to the house. And because of that, I kind of made an emotional decision, and I started to replace the roof on the house, not fully understanding the magnitude of slate roof being replaced with architectural shingles. So the HPC stopped me. I went and met with them third week of October. I explained the situation. Hey, I'm really sorry. I didn't realize it was a big deal. Had a hole in the roof causing damage to the house. They explained to me that they needed to replace that with something like slate, so a synthetic slate, and that the cost difference wasn't too great. So I went back and did some homework on it. I priced out getting the roof done with synthetic slate and found out that it was about $15,000 to $16,000 additional cost to do that. So I appealed the decision with the HPC again and went and showed them, like, hey, listen, I really messed this up. I get it, but I can't afford to replace it with the synthetic slate. My neighbors to my left and to my right have architectural shingles on their houses, so I would be kind of in line with what the neighborhood currently has. And the HPC kind of tied 3-3 and said, you know, sorry, we can't let you do it. And I said, well, I can't really afford to move forward with this. And I just didn't want to leave the house just, you know, in bad shape. So I decided to appeal their decision and come here today to ask City Council's permission to install the architectural shingles on the house, because I cannot afford to install synthetic slate or real slate on the house.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Is that all your comments?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If you would just remain there. Are there any questions from my colleagues on council?
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Whitaker, sir,
Yes.
you have the floor.
The houses that are on both sides of your house, you said that they are both architectural shingles,
That's correct, sir. Yes, sir.
and you've noticed that as well at other houses in the neighborhood?
I did. I made probably a mistake, and I said a generalized statement to the HPC, which I think might have not been a good thing to do. And I said, no houses on the block have synthetic slate or slate roofs on them. And there might be one. I don't want to, say that statement again and make that mistake, but the vast majority of the houses on that street all have architectural shingles. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Moody, sir, you have the floor.
Are the shingles already on the roof?
They are, sir. To be honest with you, I made the decision to install them because of the length of this was taking. We started this back in October, and I did not want the house just to be destroyed because of the winter coming. And I part of my fear was in the summertime, if a little bit of rain happens, I'm also going to get the heat. It's going to dry it out. I might be able to save things. With the winter coming, it was going to be damp all winter long. So I did go ahead and install the architectural shingles on the house. Yes, sir.
Are you the resident? Do you live in the house?
No, sir. I bought it. I was going to live in the house, but I can't now because I couldn't afford, long story, I couldn't afford to carry the cost of the money that it was going to take me to fix the house up. So even though I was going to live there, I can't do it now.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Battle, sir, you have the floor.
Mr. Baldwin, are there any health and safety issues?
No, sir.
Mr. Attorney, are there any legal bindings should we choose to side with him? Any liability involved if we choose to side with him?
I don't see any liability. You tend to set a precedent, but this is a de novo hearing, meaning you're starting anew, and it's a regular full hearing, and you guys are the arbitrators of that. You all decide. But there's no legal ramifications other than maybe setting a precedent when other people come before council.
Thank you, sir.
Councilman Woodard, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What arrangements did they make for you? Any alternative besides just a slate? Was it anything else that they suggested?
It was, and
Right.
we very, 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 very careful with my words. That was part of my great frustration. Is I went back to the HPC and said, hey, how can we meet in the middle? What can we do to figure this out? And the agreement at that time was, well, hey, would you be willing to build back faux chimneys? So it appears that the chimneys around the house, and would you be willing to do, I think it was metal seam roofs on the lower portions of the roof? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'd be willing to do all that at this point, just to, protect the investment, protect the house, and 3 of the individuals were like, hey, that's great. If you're willing to work with us, we're willing to work with you. And other gentlemen were just like, no. So that was the end of the discussion, I guess.
Right, so basically you're saying above the deck, they proposed that you, go with a metal roof or?
Yes, sir. And then on that little bump out that you see on the right-hand side there, I think they wanted it to be there as well.
Okay, and this right here, is this picture of a photo of the architect shingles already placed up there?
I'm not really certain because I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. I'm not 100% certain. I thought the photos that I saw originally were the photos as the roof was torn off. Yeah, that's the photo that I remember seeing. The roof has already been torn off, and the architectural shingles are sitting on top of the roof waiting to be installed.
Okay.
And I did not install the roof just so for timeline purposes, probably for 2 months as I was trying to go through the appeal process. I admit I messed up by not following the proper chain of events and command the way I should have. So I definitely screwed that up. So I did wait 2 months before I just was like, I got to do something because it was getting pretty bad inside the house.
Right. So what is your plan for the roof above the porch?
We put architectural shingles there now, and we did the same thing on the side. And
okay. So the agreement on the mediation, with putting the metal roof is out the window.
Only because I got rejected.
Mm-hmm.
So once I got rejected, I just came here. I filed the appeal here and came here.
Okay. Is there any other guidelines that the HBC said that you're going to follow besides the roof, like columns or the deck?
The chimney.
Okay.
They wanted me to build the faux chimneys, the fake chimneys, to keep the look.
Right. So that's something that you do agree that you will?
I agreed at that time. I agreed. Now I will be honest. I don't want to do it now because now I got to go rip the roof back off to cut it all out and to do it. It's the same thing with the architectural shingles. I have to rip the architectural shingles back off to install the metal roof, which is just going to require additional costs. And this was the frustration for me when I was there. I was like, man, I'll do anything you guys want me to do. How do we get to an agreement with each other where you're happy? I admit I messed up. How do I fix it? And the only way to fix it was to spend $20 grand for a faux slate roof.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilwoman Lucas Burke, ma'am, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you, sir, for your courage to come before this council and the work that you've done. In the completed picture, it looks just like your neighbor's house. I mean, the architectural shingles look just like you said on the left and the right of your house. What was the cost difference? And I know that one of the issues that the Historic Preservation Commission has been having is that their guidelines are outdated. I think they're, and if Deputy City Manager Baldwin can let us know, I think they're over 15 years old and they're working on updating them. So I would be in agreement with, what you have. I mean, it doesn't look outside of what the Historic Preservation Commission would be asking, but I guess what was the cost difference?
It was roughly $15,000 to $16,000 difference between the architectural and then doing the faux, the synthetic slate.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Moody, then Dr. Whitaker.
When you went to the hearing with HBC, did they explain to you that cost isn't a factor, and they're charged with maintaining the integrity of the historic districts?
Yeah, 100%. They definitely explained that to me, and then my counter to them was, hey, I understand, but I would think uniformity would go into play on trying to finish something. So if I was going to be the oddball out, and I was going to ruin the look of the neighborhood, man, I really understand that so much more. But when I'm going to be not changing any other attributes of the house, and I'm going to be in line with my neighbors, and we're going to improve the home, I just felt like I get it, rules, but I just felt like there should be a little bit of conversation there or leeway there between, us trying to work together to accomplish something.
But you're not going to be a neighbor. You're doing it for investment.
I was going to be a neighbor if they let me do the roof. This house was bought for me to live in, and the only reason I'm not going to live in it because I was afraid what was going to happen did happen, and that I was going to go from having to pay back my investor longer periods of time, because on the money that I borrowed to purchase the home, I pay off the time that I borrow that money. So originally when I did this, I'm thinking I can probably pay him back in 75 to 90 days, and now we're going on over 5 months of being here, and it would have hurt me bad.
On the chimneys that you agreed to do, the faux chimneys, what did you say you would have to do? Cut a hole in the?
Yeah, I'd have to do something as far as, the problem with the faux chimney at this point is how it gets secured to the roof. And the only way to properly secure it that I can think of is I'd have to cut a hole, and I'd have to add some blocking to make sure that the chimney was secure from the inside of the home up through the roof. Because if I just set it on top of the roof and tried to flash around it or try to secure it, I think that would be dangerous.
Okay.
Dr. Whitaker, you have the floor.
What's your name again?
Adam Varner, sir. Adam Varner.
Varner.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Varner, is the faux chimney requirement, is that part of the Historic Preservation Commission's requirement as well? Is that?
It was when that was, so, yes, it was. Long story short, when I first went back the second time.
No, I mean, is it part of this appeal?
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question, sir. I'm not really sure. Because as far as I know, the appeal is, it's just the fact that I can't put architectural shingles on the roof is part of the appeal.
Oh, okay.
That's how I understand it. I don't know if I'm saying that
Well,
right.
let me ask Mr. Baldwin, is the issue of the faux chimney part of the appeal as well?
Yes, I think the circumstance are in here where the original discussion with the HPC was to have the chimneys as well as the roof. And then I'd say at this point where the chimney's been removed and the roof has been changed out, that is a debatable point for city council, whether you'd want to require them to put the chimneys back on or not. It is a point of the appeal, though.
Okay, right, so if we vote to approve the decision of the HPC, the faux chimney would be required. If we vote not to approve the decision of the HPC, then the faux chimney would not be required.
I would say that's yes.
Okay, all right. Just to bring some institutional memory to this, the reason why you probably see some architectural shingles in the community is because I remember cases coming before us in the past dealing with some roofing issues in which we made some concessions and allowed for those architectural shingles to be built. And so I would think that council is not setting a precedent because it has already been established. And in all fairness, I think to Mr. Varner, we should not penalize him because we have already voted to allow architectural shingles in historic preservation communities, and that's why you see it present.
Understood.
So the proof is right there.
Yes, sir.
Vice Mayor Barnes, sir, you had signed up to speak. You pressed the button, so. Okay. Councilman Battle, sir, you have the floor.
Mr. Baldwin, is the chimney a health and safety issue?
It would be if it was not properly installed. It become a safety issue. As it is now, it is not.
Thank you.
Did you remove the chimneys originally?
I did. Yes, sir.
Are those, Councilman Woodard, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. And Mr. Allen, I just want to be clear, because you already had a meeting with the HPC. There's nothing else that you're going to be changing per se that they may, fight you for or anything. You're going to still keep the charm and keep the continuity with the neighborhood. There's no other characteristics that you probably, no abrupt changes that you'll be doing with this house.
No, sir. None.
Okay, and I just want to make it clear to the stakeholders, whatnot. Architect shingles are probably one of the better quality shingles that you can buy on the market. So that's not some cheap stuff that you're putting on this house.
No, sir. Not at all.
Absolutely.
If it was a 3-tab shingle,
Right.
Yes, that would be less. But the architectural shingle it's and I brought the. I'm sorry, I'm losing my track right now. I brought the specs of the shingle that I put on there. It's a 30-year shingle.
Right.
That we put on the house.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Sir.
Mr. Barner, I have one question for you.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to be clear. You did understand, though, in keeping with the historical rules of the historical district, that a faux chimney would be recommended. Did you understand that?
Not until I went through this process. I didn't understand that until my appeal of the HPC's original decision. And what I understood was that was a few of the members of the HPC saying, hey guys, there's already been a precedent set for us to allow architectural shingles. Why don't we control what we can control, approve this young man to install the architectural shingles with the agreement that he'll then put the faux chimneys back, with the agreement that he'll then do the lower half of the roofs with the metal seam. That was the agreement that was put on the table after my original, after the first meeting that I had with them, that we were trying to agree to, that the other members of the HPC did not agree to, and it ended in a tie.
Okay. One other question. When you said you looked at the houses on your right and your left, and you looked at other similarly situated homes in the community. Did you notice anything that they had chimneys? Did you notice that?
I can see in the picture that my neighbor does, but I don't remember, sir. No, I don't. I can tell you the reason. It's more work for me to take the chimney down than it is to leave it. And the reason I took the chimney down, it's in bad shape, and that was the reason why it was deteriorating. It didn't look good.
Okay. Councilman Moody, sir, you have the floor.
Once again, you did agree that you would replace the chimney that you took down with a faux chimney.
I guess where I don't understand about the way you state that. I agreed that if they would allow me to put the architectural shingles on, that yes, I would have put the faux chimneys back, but they didn't agree to that.
And to your point, I think that's a good agreement. And Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the retaining the architectural shingles if Mr. Bonner replaces the faux chimneys that he took down.
Thank you, sir. So I want to remind my council members that we need to sign up in terms of our electronic. So Dr. Whitaker, sir, we have a motion on the floor. Dr. Whitaker is signed up.
Yes.
And so we need to vote electronically. We need a second on the motion first.
Oh, I thought I was in order to make the motion.
You were, sir. I'm sorry.
Okay, so there's no motion on the floor yet.
Is there a place for
Well,
a substitute motion?
Well, hold on. Let me get it straight.
Okay.
So the process is we're using our electronics. So the process is the motion should have been made by asking to speak and to make the motion. Mr. Moody did make a motion, but
It's out of order.
it was out of order. So we'll go ahead with your motion, and then Mr. Moody can make a substitute motion, if that is appropriate. Is that appropriate?
Fine if his motion doesn't carry, his motion carries.
Yeah, you can't substitute.
Okay.
Mayor, I'm not sure if everyone's spoken on behalf of the city or.
No. So we do have a motion, and Dr. Whitaker, your motion is, sir?
Yes, and before I make the motion, I just want to make sure with our clerk that I'm making the proper motion, and that is that since the Historic Preservation Commission has voted to reject, then this motion needs to be a no to the Historic Preservation's vote.
Actually, sir, you're not voting on the historic preservation. You're voting on the appeal.
Oh, so this is, okay,
De novo.
this is the, okay,
De novo
okay.
starts over.
Okay, well then, I move to accept the request of the applicant in allowing for the architectural shingles to remain on the house.
And we need,
Before we get a second, Dr. Whitaker, are you including the chimneys?
No,
Oh, be clear.
okay. And do we have a second? We have a motion and a second, and I would remind my colleagues to vote electronically. And just so we clear, voting yes is to vote in favor of the appeal?
What I gotta do?
What,
Favor of allowing the.
allowing for the shingles, right, okay, right,
What I gotta
With no chimney.
with no chimney.
his didn't come up. Mr.
Okay.
Woodard's didn't come up.
Just wait one second.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, and I was about to hit all the buttons. Is this the only thing?
Ready for the vote?
Still didn't come up.
I'm going to call the roll, sir.
Okay,
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and the vote is to approve the appeal. Okay. Mr. Barnes,
Yes.
Mr. Battle,
Yes.
Mrs. Lucasberg,
Yes.
Mr. Moody,
No.
Dr. Whitaker,
Yes,
Mr. Woodard,
Yes.
Mayor Glover.
no.
The appeal is approved by a vote of 5-2.
Thank you, sir.
I just leave.
You can be seated now.
Thank you guys so much. Thank
Yeah.
you. Appreciate you.
Okay.
Ms. Jones?
This is the city assessor.
Okay. On mine. So, Mr. Doris, this is the reassessment presentation.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming, sir.
I'm always here.
Good. You have the floor.
Mayor Glover, Vice Mayor Barnes, member of council, fellow appointees, team members of the city, neighbors. My name is Patrick Doris. I'm the city assessor, a position I've held since the end of September of last year. What I'd like to do is go over preliminary findings for the real estate assessment. So I'm going to jump down real. Did I just hit? I wanted to slip through the slides real quick and come back to the beginning. Okay. The bottom one? The bottom? I was going to jump to the end, get into the answer, and then work back to the beginning again. If we could get to page 17 real quick, if that's okay. The red, go back up one. The overall city assessment projection is roughly 10% increase across the board. That's aggregate number. I just wanted to press that into y'all's mind. Now, if we could go back to the beginning, that'd be great. Okay. I'm addressing the preliminary conclusions for the real estate assessments. Undoubtedly, everybody's constantly heard, and I think everything's been beaten into us how strong the market has been. That's reflected in our assessments currently. The effective date evaluation, and this is an interesting point, is January 1st. This typically isn't that important, but in light of COVID over the last years, there's been appeals based on this date. Now, that is the effective date evaluation. Of course, the taxes go into effect July 1st. And I point that out, years past, it hasn't mattered that much unless we get into a court situation. But with the COVID, as it occurred, I believe, March year before last, it was a constant source of appeal. Anyhow, second topic on that, I noticed in the ordinance, the projected time to finish the assessment is January 31st of each and every given year, when at all practical. I wouldn't be opposed to pushing that back 1 month. Reason being, in a fast-changing market, it's important to get as much data as possible. All the sales activity through December. We generally get our sales from the courts about 2 weeks after the previous month, excuse me. So in other words, middle of January, we're getting our sale data from the courts for December. Okay, I mentioned the date of valuation, which is July 1st, excuse me. And of course, what's impacted our assessments? Home prices. They've continued to skyrocket. I could quote endless articles, and I think everybody would agree with me. Why? Low interest rates. Inventory. I just heard an article from NPR stating the local real estate information resources that mentioned there's a 1 month supply of homes on the market right now. That's short. Market times continue to stay very low. That's what's driving values. Now, I haven't lost the sight that interest rates are starting to climb up on us, and that will be addressed following year if it does impact the value. It could. Can we have the next slide, please? So what's the next step in the process? Conclude the assessments, send out notices, go through the appeal process. We're always happy to meet with people, inspect the property, hear their insights. That's how we gain our knowledge. And then the land book will be, as of July 1st, it generally physically gets printed sometime mid-August. Next slide, thank you. This just touches base, the authority for assessment. We also try to be uniform among classes of property. This is going to come back in a moment when I'm going to address another situation, a couple situations. Okay, and we shoot for 100% of fair market value. Okay, so we need to be uniform across all classes of property. One shouldn't be at 100% and another 60, 70, 50%. Next slide, please. Okay, market value defined. This is just a case that's been widely held in Virginia. We go to the next slide. This is the industry standard. And this is from Fannie Mae. It's been accepted by Office of Comptroller of Currency, Freddie Mac, interagency regulations. Buyer and seller are typically motivated. No one's at odds to sell a property. Why would I sell a property? I'm divorced. I have to sell the property. Someone passed away, a short sale. There's a number of reasons that influence a property sale. We're just looking for clean property sales that aren't influenced. People are, I don't have to sell, I don't have to buy. So they come to the conclusion and reach a common mindset to come up with a value. Next slide, please. Oh, here's the admission of our office. To appraise all property throughout the city in a fair and equitable manner. The state of Virginia provides that we do it 100% of market value, and they also identify the International Association of Assessment Officers as the standards. And those standards are pretty critical, and they provide a great platform for assessing property. Okay, we carry it out, the staff well. Okay, here we go. A daily, hold it, no, that last one's important, I apologize. Okay, the mission will be carried out in a courteous, efficient, and professional manner by staff dedicated to the service of citizens of Portsmouth. I can't recommend the staff in the assessor's office strong enough. It's been a skeleton crew. I got here at the end of September. They've been all the way through, keeping the office open, making day-to-day functions. The staff there is strong. They're second to none. We are understaffed. I'll get into the budget part, and this office hits outside its weight. If we look at it revenue per person, the only one who beats us is a staff 24 people across the water in Norfolk. That's saying a lot for 7 people in our office right now, and at times, sometimes by themselves, down to 4 people. I just had to put that pitch. Also, because I mentioned we're low in staff, I'm in the recruiting phase, and I'm looking for people. If anyone happens to know, let me express what I'm looking for. This weekend, for example, I ran across somebody in Portsmouth. He was in a management position. He did some time in the military, enabled him to get his degree from Old Dominion in Geographical Information Services, GIS. And he's feeling, what am I going to do with this degree now that I got it? I like maps, I got this degree. How do I go forward with it? GIS, maps, real estate. I suggested he might want to apply. Those are the type of people I'm looking for. Someone with database management, Excel skills. The necessity for a college degree isn't paramount, but it makes it so much easier to get an appraisal license. It satisfies basic education. Next slide. Okay, what do we do on a daily basis? We inspect, collect data, review, update records. That's a constant. I took this slide from a year ago, 2 years perhaps. Perform statistical analysis. Well, we're using a rather dated, what we call CAMA system, Computer Assisted Mass Appraisal System. The system came around in the early 1980s. And it's done great for the 40 years, well, actually for 20 or 30 years, but it's been outdated for the last 2 decades. We do actually have another program which is pretty robust and strong. We've been playing with it or trying to implement it for a decade. It's at a point now where it doesn't necessarily communicate with Windows platforms. So that's going to bring additional costs to bring that online, which is a necessity. The old CAMA system is old. I'm old. We all have to be replaced sooner or later. This is an important feature. It will provide better statistical analysis. You can actually manipulate the data. The legacy system is primitive at best. I get PDFs. I have to convert them to Excel, to analysis, try to do some sort of analysis. It's just not friendly. You know, technology has moved on. Next slide, please. Okay, again, day-to-day, we process, validate sales, parcels, combinations, splits, whatnot. Always provide assistance to the public. I guess as a city assessor, we're at the top of the list, and we get a lot of phone calls. We also administer or manage programs. When I say manage, we take the information and maintain it. For example, the DAVs, that's really administered by the Commissioner of Revenue, but we reflect it on the land book. That's the point. A senior citizen, same thing. It's just managed, it's noted on the land book and the same. Now, in our office, we're do the rehab, we have an open space, tax exempt properties, churches, whatnot. And environmental restoration site is administered in our office. So those are the programs that we either manage or administer. Next slide, please. Thank you. What did we do this past year? Revaluation of residential properties. Okay, we focused on the level of assessment, and in a moment, I'll share with you the level of assessment. How is it determined? Here's just a real quick example. The assessment's 100 grand, sold for 120. We're at an 83% ratio. Okay. Level of assessment between typo, between 90 to 110 is considered acceptable. And again, that's from the IAAO standards. Now, here's something else that's very important. The coefficient of dispersion between 5 to 15 is acceptable for neighborhoods of diverse properties, whether they're old, they're the same, they're all over the place, which we have a lot of. We have a lot of aging neighborhoods in inventory where we're seeing a lot of new construction coming in, a lot of flips coming in. Some of those neighborhoods, I think, will surprise some people. They're some of the strongest in the city in terms of quarterly building permit activity. What the coefficient of dispersion measures is effectively the median difference between the average assessment level. The lower number is good, a higher number is bad. Next slide, please. Now, I said I focused on land sales. Here's just an example. Lot on Greenwood sold for $68,000. It was assessed at 41. This is where I'm like, we're focusing on land sales. That doesn't mean only your land increased or stayed the same, but it was an important factor to consider. We have another lot on Smithfield. You can see it sold for 50. It's assessed at 30 some odd thousand. And then one in Sterling Point, typo lowercase, sold for 107. It's assessed at just under $80,000. Those are being addressed as we're trying to get land values in accordance with market values. Next slide. Okay, here is the assessment to sale price ratio and percentage change by neighborhood. Each and every neighborhood won't necessarily change. We're going to look at what the assessment level is for that specific neighborhood, take into consideration number of sales, COD, and make projections. Again, we're utilizing an older CAMA system, which I'm set on replacing with Vision. We have to. I've been told by IT, whatnot, it's dated and it's problematic. So if we go through these, we can see the Admiral Landon again. The assessment ratio before and after, zero change. Afton let's shoot down. If you look on the left screen, you can easily see the assessment ratios of all the neighborhoods. That's where they began. So 97.69, 74.64, 88.13, 104.106. It didn't change, 104.106 or 06, excuse me. Arcadia Heights, 79.45 to 99, et cetera, et cetera. The assessment levels erode and below 80% becomes problematic and very well could subject us to state funding issues. So we want to stay as close as we can without overshooting the neighborhoods. Again, consideration of that coefficient of dispersion is important. Put that in perspective in just a moment. If we had an assessment at 100% and you had a coefficient of dispersion of, say, 31.5, that implies your average range would go from 60, 66 or 60, 66.5 to 133.5. That's a wide range and not acceptable. So again, coefficient of dispersion small, good. Wide, bad. Next slide. This will just go through all the neighborhoods. You may not see your neighborhood in here. We're still diligently working on accomplishing this. Some team members are probably working right now. You go through a couple slides. I think y'all getting my point with the ratio analysis here? And one more slide, it's kind of the same thing, and here we go. So our starting ratio for residential properties only was just under 84%, and our ending ratio is roughly 95%. That represents a 13.3% increase to residential properties. Okay, next. Taxable properties, residential, roughly 32,000. We have commercial, 24,000. As I mentioned, residential properties overall increased 13.3. Commercial properties only increased by 2.23. The reason why we're so low on commercial properties is the COD is 33.5. That's well in excess of the standards. I've been surgically looking at multifamilies. Multifamilies in and of themselves will increase about 12.5, but there's so much other commercial property that needs to be addressed. We have to address it, and coupled with vision, that's going to be one of the priority in the next year. Whether we can get that down, yeah, we will, one way or the other. 33.5 is not acceptable for COD. Next slide. This is where we started. This is a total overall increase I started with, roughly 10%, 9.84. You'll see that our new overall taxable base will be nearly $9 billion. We just started at a little over $8 billion. The impact, if we maintain the tax rate at $1.30, will be over $10 million. Breaking out the growth on each one, we get just under 1% growth on residential and 1.3 on commercial. The appreciation is obviously much higher on each. Commercial, again, is problematic with the high COD. Next slide. This is just touching base on what we get for State Corporation Commission. This is where some of the issues with if we allow the assessment level to degrade, we may not get some funding back from the state. And we're getting 1.7 back right now. So what's the next steps? Notices going out in mid-March, informal appeals, then Board of Equalization. We're going to continue. We didn't include fourth quarter in this, which is coming up. And then the handbook will be set July 1st and printed physically come August. And I think questions and answers, please.
Councilman Moody, sir, you have the
sir.
floor.
Thank you. And I see it here now. I was going to ask when assessments are going out. I take it the numbers that you're giving us here is the average per neighborhood.
That's correct.
But those are final, right?
Correct. The ones you have there, yes, are final.
Okay.
There will be a few more neighborhoods that were not included that we're working on currently. And as I mentioned, I'm still looking at multifamilies.
Why are they not concluded?
Time constraints and the delivery. It'll be until we send the notice file out. We'll be working on these, refining them.
Okay. So, and citizens can appeal these?
Yes, sir.
Through what period of time?
They're going to be, we're heading out probably through the end of March through the 1st of April. Trying to get the notice file mailed out. I would like to say the 1st of March. That won't happen. It will happen the second week of March. Give the staff a break for a week, and then we'll be entertaining any informal appeals. In reality, someone can always call an appeal. And then if there's an issue with the property, such as a material mistake, we'll address it.
What's the deadline?
The deadline, I do have it with me. That staff person is out today, unfortunately, but I apologize. I can circle back with you and get that number, specific date. We've already pinned it down. So, it's going to be 2 weeks of appeals, and then followed by a week off, still appeals, and then 2 weeks of Board of Equalization.
I would suggest getting
Yes, sir.
something posted
Oh,
on,
absolutely.
on what the deadline is. Now, you're saying they can call and appeal? They don't have to set an appointment?
They do need to set an appointment.
Okay.
However, if anybody calls and complains, we're not going to turn people away.
Okay. What kind of information should they bring to an appeal?
Why they think the assessment's wrong, such as, you're saying my house is 1,000 square feet, it's only 950. Okay. You believe it's worth 100,000, I think it's 70,000. Why do you think it's 70,000? Is it the condition of the property? Fine, can we come look at it? Excellent, we'll address that. It's not a problem. So basically, why? Square footage, market value. Material, when I say square footage, I'm referring to material mistake. If we said you had 1 acre and you had, half acre, that's a material mistake.
And I would think sale comparables.
Absolutely. Again, that goes to the rationale, if we have $100,000 on the property, someone says, my house is only worth 70. Okay, show me your $70,000 homes. Let us see your home to see if the condition warrants 70, or maybe it warrants 100 or 110. If it's a condition issue, we'll address it.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Mayor.
Welcome, sir. Dr. Whitaker, sure, you have the floor.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Ms. Doris, on page 17, the 10.3 million impact,
Yes, sir.
that's just based on these properties that you have assessed as of today?
That is correct.
Okay, so that figure is
Will
subject
likely
to
change upwards.
Okay. And based on information that you shared, will you be presenting to council some issues as far as ordinance change? You said something.
Right, I would
to
like to
regard-
touch base with that, changing the date it's due. Again, it does say January
Right.
31st or as practically possible.
Right.
A month later would,
So you're going to be getting with council to
Yes, sir.
present, okay. And then as far as, I thought I heard a couple of budget issues. You mentioned about your staff
yes, sir.
and needing an increase in staff.
Yes, sir.
Are the funds there to increase your staff, or
Yes,
is
I
that a
believe
budget
there
issue?
are 11 full-time employees on staff. We currently have 7, including myself.
Okay.
12 would be nicer.
So are the so you do have the funds to staff?
Right. That will bring us more into mandate 2 with IAAO standards, bringing
okay.
up an extra person.
And I just want to make sure if that's an
Right, if we
increased
didn't have-
budget issue that you bring. And
Yes.
so as far as commercial assessors, they would be, you mentioned something about the assessing commercial properties. Are you planning on hiring more
Yes, sir.
commercial assessors?
Yes, at least one, and they're not inexpensive.
Okay.
I've already,
But you have the budget? You
Yes,
have
sir.
that, all right. And then the computer system, you say it's outdated.
that's
Is
outdated.
that
That
some-
might push our budgetary
So
issues.
is that a request you're going to be making to council?
It
or
is
budget?
going to be a
Okay.
request. It's not this isn't an option anymore. It's,
Okay.
the old system is old, and I have nightmares of coming into work one day and it just
Compared
not-
to what other cities are using?
We're lagging.
Hmm?
We're lagging far behind, sir, by decades.
Okay.
I can tell you specifically, Virginia Beach went to ProVal probably 10 years ago. That's an alternative CAMA system. Robust at the time, it in and of itself is starting to appear somewhat dated.
Okay.
Norfolk currently has ProVal and possibly, maybe I'm speaking outside what I should, considering Vision.
Is that going to require additional personnel who's skilled in that software?
Yes, sir, it will. Again, there's the cost. I hear numbers thrown about to get another data dump, if you will, because we've let it kind of go too far,
Okay.
possibly 6 figures.
Okay.
It might be necessary to do that. The other alternative would be to have staff focused on manually going through each and every day, and at 30-some-odd thousand parcels.
Right. So you'll get with the city manager on
Yes,
that?
sir.
Okay. Thank you.
So
Council-
connect
Council-
me if,
Mr. Battle, could you please press the speaker button so that we can,
I thought we had gone manual.
no, sir.
We just voted manual.
I know, but we're using this, we're using the
Well, we
speaker
just
button, sir.
voted manual. I was under the impression we were.
Thank you,
manual.
sir. If you would please help me with that, I would appreciate it.
You're so kind.
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Now, correct me if I'm erring. So you're saying it's 92.92% per 100 for residential.
Yes, sir.
Then it's $1.30 for commercial.
Well, the $1.30 is our tax rate.
That's what I'm saying, per.
I'm sorry. Those are, they're just growth. In other words, new construction or the subdivision of a lot, something that would increase the value other than appreciation. Appreciation just being the natural value of a property increasing and or decreasing, such as we've experienced over the last several years with the strong market. These are just growth in terms of giving a representative sample for construction activity,
Right.
what's going on in the city.
Like, what's the percentage rate for residential and the percentage rate for commercial?
The appreciation part? Or?
No, just the assessment.
Oh, the assessment level currently for commercial property is 75.34, roughly 75%, and that's with the 33.5 COD. That made it very difficult to do any sort of across-the-board adjustment with commercial property. I have done that with multifamilies, and we're gaining, at this point, 12.5%. I do have more multifamilies to address.
And residential?
Residential, we just have a handful of neighborhoods left, sir. That,
Now, maybe I'm not
sure.
telling you what I want. If we do an assessment on a house and we say, okay, it's $100,000 at value, what percentage do we use to get the amount of tax owed?
90, it's going to be 95. Bear with me. Sorry, 94.93.
94. And residential?
That is residential, sir.
And commercial?
And the commercial is dangerous, and it's bad because the 75.5% in the COD throws it so far out. It stipulates that they have to be strategically adjusted. In the case of apartments, I get it. I got 12.5% increase in apartments, but commercial at large.
What were the total revenues from last year that were paid to the city through your assessment for commercial and then for residential?
I know total is about $104 million. I don't have the breakout specifically,
Oh, okay.
but the total is about 104 for our total revenue from real estate taxes. And I could surmise from that,
So
I could get back to you on that.
So commercial is lower than residential?
Yes, it is.
That's an error.
That is not good. Need to be addressed. My concern as well, sir.
Mr. Moody, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm really a little perplexed on your description of the CAMA system.
Okay.
And what's our vendor?
Our vendor for the new one is Vision.
Yeah, Vision's Government Solutions?
That's correct.
I recall just a few years ago, they came down, and they came down because we weren't operational on the new system. And they offered, at that time, they were going to implement version 8, as they described it. And that would ensure that we had the latest, greatest technology in the camera system.
Yes, sir.
So
It was.
you're telling us, and at that time, a couple of years ago, we weren't even operational with the camera system, the new camera system as it was referred to at that time.
That's right.
So you're telling us now, just a few years later, the whole system is outdated?
It's not outdated. It hasn't been implemented. So we missed
So,
the opportunity.
okay, so the problem is still the same problem a few years ago. It hasn't been
And it's worse.
implemented.
Yes, sir, and it's worse.
Well,
You just mentioned you knew it was going to the version 8. Well, when it went from version 7 to version 8, I understand there's complete interoperability between the old CAMA system as far as doing a data swipe and a dump into the new version 8. The old version can operate off Windows 7, for example. The new version, Windows 10. And IT, just help me out if I'm wrong, but that's how I understand it. And we've missed opportunities to keep abreast of this system, which is painful.
well, what does the vendor have to say? I mean, they came down with some high power. I think the CEO and the COO came down and said everything was on track, and
Yes, sir.
they were going to assist in getting it operational.
That's what I
I
understood,
take
too.
it we're probably paying them pretty good money.
$26,000 a year for maintenance.
How much?
$26,000 a year for maintenance.
Have they been back down, or have you requested that they come back down?
I've talked to them informally, and they say to do what I want to do is 6 figures, low 6 figures, because we've missed the opportunity when we went to the version 8. That's where I mentioned lost opportunities and expenses on page whatever.
Well,
Yes, sir.
They're the ones that suggested that that we go to version 8, and they were going to assist in that.
Yes, sir.
I think it would be a good idea, if my colleagues are in agreement, that we hear from the vendor.
Absolutely.
At a work session. Doesn't sound, I mean, we bought this system, and it
Yes, sir.
never has been online. Now we're finding out it's outdated.
It's not outdated. It just hasn't been implemented. It's actually a robust, and from my experience with CAMA systems, it's a pretty darn good one. It's really good. I mentioned ProVal. ProVal's dated.
Well, it's not good if we're not using it. Mayor, I would
Precisely.
suggest, if council's in agreement, that we hear from the vendor and set up some timelines
Yes, sir.
on getting this thing implemented, or finding out how we're going to get some money back.
I think that's an appropriate ask at this time. So
Councilman
we
Moody, I
will.
will do that.
Thanks.
Absolutely. I'm in total agreement.
Well, first of all, Councilwoman Lucas Burke is next on the speaking line. So, Councilwoman Lucas Burke,
Yes.
you have the floor, ma'am.
Great, thank you, sir. Mr. Dorsey, great report. Looking at the reassessment, I noticed that some neighborhoods, Admiral Landing, Crawford Square, Lake Forest One,
ma'am.
First Watch, some of them have 0%.
They did not change. And again, the ratio on those were higher, and the COD might have been on the extreme side. For example, if we look at Admiral's Watch, I think the ratio was 104. So we're already at 104. Why would we change it? Because then we would be exceeding the sale prices.
Okay.
So that's why those didn't get changed.
Okay.
And it was a combination. What's the current assessment level? Is it 104? And what's the COD? Another measurement of accuracy of assessments.
So I guess the mission is to get to the highest sale value price on each property?
Yes, ma'am. 100% of market value is the goal. Realizing I gave an example of 100%, and I used the commercial property, that's 33.5, and that gives you such a wide range. Those can only be changed on a strategic one by one, and in fact, every single commercial property needs to be looked at and considered based on these ratios and matrix. They'll be addressed. They have to.
Okay, and then my last question
Ma'am.
is, You mentioned about the $1.30 real estate rate, and I know our citizens want to know about that, a plan that you have, or maybe we could address on how we would reduce that. Are there any action plans or any steps being looked at to look
There
at reducing?
certainly are, and that's going to be at your disposal. Again, anytime there's an assessment increase greater than the aggregate of 1%, the rate automatically gets adjusted to last year's budgetary cycle and the new aggregate assessed amount. I'm thinking it's $1.20 some odd based on top of my head. I think $1.22, and the change of that will be at your discretion.
That would be the biggest gift to the citizens, I'm sure.
Correct, absolutely. I mean, so they have the opportunity for the informal appeal, the Board of Equalization appeal, and also to stand before you and express their concerns.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Dr. Whitaker, sir, you have the floor.
The $26,000 a year annual maintenance contract, that is being paid, and what is it that the city is getting from that if the software has not been implemented?
We're not getting anything since we're not utilizing the program properly.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
I wish we were.
In regards to the tax rate issue that Councilwoman Lucas Burke just brought up,
Yes, sir.
the changing back, I thought the rate was already at 1.3 for the past several years, because there hasn't been a tax increase, so there's nothing to go back to.
Well,
If that's what you, and then too, that discussion would definitely have to be with the manager, because
absolutely.
they're basing that on
Absolutely,
these
yes, sir.
figures. And which raises a issue that I've always been concerned with and how we present it to our citizens. We constantly present, we're not raising your taxes, but the taxes that are paid through real estate is a function of the tax rate and the assessed value.
Yes, sir.
So even though the tax rate may not increase, the assessed value increases, and so it is really a
they're
tax
interrelated.
increase.
I'm very conscious of that.
Yeah,
So that they're
and-
absolutely interrelated.
Right, so we, when we tell them we're not raising taxes and all that, that's not really forthright. But
Correct.
I think that with the issues we have, we definitely can't look at scaling back on that because of the expenses that we presently have in the city and the land that is not taxable.
Correct.
Thank you, sir. And City Manager Jones, ma'am, you have the floor.
Yes, I'll just continue what Councilman Dr. Whitaker just stated to ensure that we get all the information before we start sending out messages about a reduction in taxes.
Yes, ma'am.
We have a number of priorities in the city. Specifically, we just had a meeting with the schools talking about school needs. We have infrastructure needs. We have a host of issues that we will be discussing during the budget process, and I think it's something regarding the tax rate needs to be talked about in totality. So, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Doris,
Yes,
sir, can you just elaborate? I was a little concerned about what you said on page 16 about the commercial property values and how that puts us potentially at some level of risk, I thought maybe you were
Right.
talking about?
I said that in the
Go ahead.
well, I said that in the overall context of the assessment level.
Okay.
Now, that is still true with the commercial properties as they are so low. They need to be addressed. We can't linger on any farther. But again, another matrix for measurement is that coefficient of dispersion. It's so high. We could address that. We won't get in trouble right away, but if this is ignored for any length of time, the state could very well penalize us in some fashion from state.
Well,
funding.
explain to us, because we perhaps don't
Sure.
understand what that means. I don't understand totally
Sure,
what
I
it
got you.
means.
I live in my world. We all
Okay.
live in everyone's
So
world.
explain
you know.
what the repercussions of that could potentially be.
Well, they could very likely look at it, and since it's commercial property, if we were to put them a broad spectrum, this is clearly 5% different than residential property. IAAO standards recommend no more than 5% between classes of property. Now, you can break down classes of property: commercial, multifamily, industrial. In this case, we've classified them all as commercial. It's kind of our stopgap and gathers everything. Again, somewhat of a limitation of the old CAMA system, but going forward, that can be taken care of, and we can industrial, commercial, multifamily. It's that variation, insignificantly large variation, that isn't from the, let's say, what would you come into this at 84% for the residential, and we're adjusting that to roughly 95%. Commercial, we came into it, I believe, at 74%, and it's not really being addressed because there are going to be so many property. It can't be a blanket across the board assessment increase on commercial properties. It has to be a strategic individual property. They need to be looked at and addressed correctly. I've seen assessments on commercial properties with, I think one on the top of my head, $17,000 for improvements. For the life of me, every time I drive by it, I don't see any improvements on it. I see another one with obviously a building on it, and we have 0 assessments on it. I see assessment of commercial property with no roofs, facades. We have a significant, what's a significant assessment? 30, 40,000. I see that. These are alarming issues that need to be addressed. And while they can be individually addressed here or there, as the ones I've spotted, we need boots on the ground, someone to look at each one of these and value the properties. Even more so the multifamily. That's been as strong as a market as residential. We have multifamily, newer ones that have sold, some approaching twice what our current assessment is. I'll be addressing those handful over this year, but going forward, we need to get in front of them. I need to get in front of them.
And Councilman Moody, sir?
Yes, sir.
Well, is the problem manpower problem?
Yes, sir.
With the, in other words, you don't have enough feet on the ground to get to all the commercial properties?
Correct.
Okay. How about the new construction properties? I know the assessments are usually phased in. Are we doing that on, say, the casino,
Gotcha.
Holly Point, and some other projects around town?
Generally, at this present time, projects go up so quickly, it's not necessary to phase them in or give them a partial assessment. For example, an apartment building, there's one being built right down here off of...
That's Holly Point.
Is it Holly Point? Yeah. I've noticed they haven't started taking occupancy yet, which I find a little bizarre. As soon as they do, it will go on at 100% of market value. If they get a little discount, it will just be for a month or two it takes them to lease up. But apartments are filling so quickly, that isn't what is going on. In years past, yes, sir, you'd have an apartment complex go up and they'd have, partial assessment because it took 6-8 months for it to fill up. That's not the case of recent, so we try to reflect that.
Okay. One other thing,
Yes, sir.
Mayor, to my colleague, Dr. Whitaker's point on the tax burden, our citizens are going to be hit with personal property tax
Yes, sir.
increase. This can be quite significant.
That's what I understand.
I was reading the average automobile vehicle price increased over last year $6,000. So I think we need to have a conversation on that. I don't know what we can do as far as freezing it to last year's levels on automobile prices or taking a percentage, but we need to have that discussion because we're going to have some people looking at these new assessments. We're going to have some people that are going to be in some, I think, some financial problem. And I'm not talking about, I'm talking about middle class and maybe even upper middle class people that may be in that boat. So if we can include that in that discussion, and I think that discussion needs to happen sooner rather than later as well.
We already have that work session scheduled for the next council.
Good, great.
Okay.
Thanks, Ms. Jones.
I'm meeting with the Commissioner of Revenue tomorrow, and we're certainly to discuss that. Yes, sir.
Very good, sir. Dr. Whitaker, sir, you have the floor.
Yeah, yes, just follow with Mr. Moody's point out, I agree with that as well, because in that case, we're not in control of the valuation of personal property. So, but what we are in control of, I believe, is the rate. And so I could see in that case where we would be looking to make some rate adjustment to help our citizens, because that's really a false increase due to market conditions. So I can see that, but in that case. But my other question, and looking through here, when we start talking about commercial property, private commercial property, I don't see Elizabeth Manor Golf Course in here.
Yes, sir. That's under the land use program, an open use program. So the taxes for that, not for the clubhouse per se, but for the actual golf course section is in the land use program. I'm looking at various exemption programs in their administration and applicability. There are several that need to be addressed.
Okay, I was going to say, I think we need a follow-up on
Absolutely.
that as far as that land use
Correct.
Issue.
Because there's no assessment on.
So all of that acreage of property, the city gets no tax
Nothing on it,
revenue
and it
off.
should be, the state sets out rates under land use, which includes the open space,
Yeah.
forestry, agricultural, horticultural, open space. This one fell under the open space premise.
Yeah, that's a privately
Yes,
owned
sir.
property, right?
The state sets rates for it, so it should have at least a $2,000 per acre as opposed to a zilch value, and that's how the land use is administered. State gives you a range for golf courses. I think it's 1,500 to 2,500. If it was forestry, it's.
When can we get a follow-up on that? What time?
On that, it'll be included in this year's assessment.
You said, well, I thought it was some issues with it being designated as.
No, it's
it
not the
is.
designation part. As long as they do an annual filing on that, it's okay. I'm just pointing out that the misapplication of the assessment process on it for land use property. Again, you have the market value of the land. Let's just say for conversation purposes only, it's 75,000, use 100, whatever, 75,000 per acre. I think it's 104 acres. I can't remember. It's 100 and some odd acres just for the golf course.
But doesn't the city have to approve that?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
And
so-
the city had approved it. It is filed in the courts.
But isn't that approved on an annual basis?
They have to maintain that with a submission to my office.
On an annual
Yes,
basis?
sir.
But but doesn't council have to approve it on an
No,
annual?
you only have to approve it the one time,
Okay.
and then it's just an annual submission. There's other exemption programs I'm looking into as well, which
Okay.
I'm going to need help on.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions? Mr. Doris, so. Councilman Battle, sir? You have the floor.
So you're theoretically saying that we could bring the commercial assessment values up to where they need to be and possibly drop some of the burden on our citizens?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So we're on what was, I think, requested on bringing back the additional information that was requested.
Correct.
Are you good with that, sir?
Absolutely. What I'd like to do in a few weeks after everything's final and sent out, come back with you the final numbers, also get back with you on vision and talk with the city manager about the potential for the CAM of cost
Right.
or whatnot.
And then having, I guess.
Yes, sir.
I think the council's in agreement to have the vendor that we hired to come and explain to us what's going on. Giving
Correct,
an update.
absolutely. I'd like to have a little bit more clarity on it than ambiguous.
Sure. So I just want to make sure we were all clear.
Yes,
But
sir.
thank you for your presentation.
I'm always
Sharing the
available.
information, and things look like we're headed in a positive direction.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
City Manager Jones?
Yes, at this time, I would like to provide a summary of the city manager report items that will be discussed in tonight's meeting. The first one starting with 22-49 for $1,250. This is funding will be used to add a bench, concrete pad, and solar landscape lights to improve the park at 2715 Bagley Street under the Neighborhood Matching Grant Program. The next item is 2250 for $5,000. These funds will be used to implement the strategic prevention framework planning model for gambling prevention services. The next one also with BHS for 22-51 for $12,500. This award allows for one-time funding to allow up to 67 participants in a virtual Creating Trauma-Sensitive Schools conference to prevent substance use disorder through an array of strategies. The next one, 22-52 for $40,000. This funding will allow BHS to provide opiate misuse prevention, treatment, and recovery services. And then the last one, 22-53, is for $412,000. This funding will be used to implement the disparity study.
Thank you, ma'am. Were there any questions from our colleagues on council for our city manager?
No, sorry.
Dr. Whitaker, you have the floor, sir.
All right. Thank you, sir. The report backs, that's going to be given during our regular meeting? Okay,
Correct.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We've now come to the city council liaison reports. Do we have any liaison reports at this time? Councilwoman Lucas Burke, ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, I did attend the Hampton Roads Regional Jail Authority meeting on last Wednesday. It was held at the Hampton Convention Center, closed out with Hampton remaining the chair. The fiscal year 2023 budget was approved. Of course, Portsmouth was in opposition to that due to the number of bed space we're having to pay based on the cost. We are expecting a rebate within the next 30 days, and that was the reassessment that they did for all of the member jurisdictions based on the number of bed space. So we're looking at somewhere in the $1.9 million to return to us within the next 30 days. And would like to announce that because Portsmouth did not carry last year because I was new to the board, Portsmouth will carry as the host city this year, so I am now the chair of the Hampton Roads Regional Jail Authority.
Congratulations, ma'am.
Thank you.
Dr. Whitaker, sir.
Yes, Mayor. Councilwoman Lucas Burke and I met with the Disparity Study Evaluation Committee, and a vendor has been selected, and that's what item 22-53 is what we're voting on.
Thank you, sir. Any other liaison reports? Seeing none, then this public work session is adjourned. We will come back into the chamber for our 7 o'clock meeting. Thank you.